Hi there. Welcome to Tuesday Talks. We're delighted that you could join us again this week. And we once again have a very special guest, Dr. Eric Lawson. Hi, Eric.
Oh,
And Eric obviously is a face that I think many of you recognize because Eric is the assistant concertmaster of the Great Lakes Chamber Orchestra and has played with the GLCO for, probably 10 years or so, Eric, I think. Yeah. And he also is the conductor and concertmaster of the Alpena Symphony Orchestra, and he also plays with the Gaylord Orchestra. But before we get into some of those things, Eric, if you don't mind, I'd like you to take us back to some of the earlier days. How did you get involved with music, and did you start with the violin when you started your music lessons?
yeah, it's interesting. I started in the public school system, and for a violinist, pretty late, at fourth grade or whenever it is they started us. I had a grandfather who was a clarinet player, and both my parents played a little bit of piano, but not terribly seriously. But I went to, they have these tests sometimes, I guess they give, and they test your aptitude for music and they see if you can hear,
Yeah.
and apparently I got a really high score on that test. And they said, well, you should really consider playing an instrument or singing or something like that. And I said, oh, yeah, that sounds okay. What do you got? And they said, well, you could wait a year and then you could, maybe have a brass instrument or a flute or something like that. Or if you want to start right away next year, you could have a violin or a string instrument. And I said, well, that sounds fun. I don't want to wait. Give me a violin. And it just kind of grew from there. And it was very strange, I think, for my parents not ever having had anybody in the house like that. I was down in my room practicing sometimes 4 or 5 hours a day. But I think they just sort of thought, what's he doing? What's he doing down there? But it was just love at first sight or first hearing. It just grabbed me. I didn't let go.
I guess so. And to have a youngster that you don't have to force or coerce into practicing is pretty
Oh, yeah.
amazing. And so then obviously you stuck with it through middle school and high school.
Yep.
And your college then took you where?
I went to Michigan State, where I studied with the teacher I've been studying with in high school, wonderful man named Walter Verder. And after that, I actually applied for a Fulbright, and I didn't get that, but the teacher who was on the committee in New York listening to tapes called my teacher and said, well, if this guy doesn't go to Germany, I want him. I didn't get the Fulbright, so I went to Louisiana to study with Sally O'Reilly. And boy, that was a really fantastic experience. Of course, coming from Michigan culturally, it was great and very, very interesting.
Sure. So that was post-college work then?
That was my master's degree. Yep. And I started my doctorate there. And then she moved to a new job at the University of Minnesota. And there were some of us who were just so crazy about her teaching. We went with her. And so I finished my doctorate from the University of Minnesota.
Interesting. And a doctorate in violin performance?
Yeah. Yep. In violin performance. Yeah, it was kind of a strange mood. It was sort of like going from the fireplace into the freezer. It was, I think, even though I was from a northern clime, I'd been in Louisiana about 4 years, and I was just getting used to it.
Right.
So it was
blood was thinning, as they say. And
yeah,
exactly. Well, but there is a bunch of really interesting stuff in your resume, Eric, and so you need to tell us a little bit, walk us through. I think that you spent time in Europe, you spent time in Asia, you spent time in South America. So just give us a little bit about what took you to all these different places, and what exactly were you doing? Were you teaching? Were you playing, performing? What was that?
Well, my first trip to Europe was actually with the Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp International Orchestra. I was 15. I was concertmaster of the group, and they said, hey, we need somebody to play a solo. Why don't you play this Beethoven Romance, the one in F major? And so there I was, I'd only really been practicing the violin seriously for a couple of years. But there I was, on this tour, and I'll never forget one of the scariest moments of my life. I'm standing on the stage of this beautiful German radio hall in Hanover, and there are several thousand people in the audience, and that was not something I had exactly signed up for, but
You do die, right? I mean, that's it,
yeah. So that started a real interest for me in traveling internationally. I went on the next year. I went on the same Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp tour, and then as I got into college work as a professor, that I started doing more international travel again. And so, yeah, I do have some strange things in my resume. Like, for example, I have conducted the Conservatory Orchestra of the University of Transylvania, which is kind of interesting. It's a lovely place. It's in Brașov, Romania. And I went there to conduct Hanson's Second Symphony. I also gave some recitals, played some Ives and Copland with a wonderful duo partner I had at the time. And
music, yeah.
Yeah. So that was really great. And of course, traveling in Romania was fantastic. It was you met people who had been trained very differently, and yet were fabulous musicians. It was really amazing to compare notes on that sort of thing. And then I just sort of every so often would do some kind of interesting tour. I have a wonderful friend named João Paulo Casarotti. He's from Brazil, and we did a couple of trips to Brazil to play a variety of music. And he's a wonderful pianist, so it's really was always fun to do that with him.
So a piano violin duo?
Yeah, and also ensembles and such. But yeah. So that was really great. And I have taught master classes and such in China. That was really interesting. But my main interest, in being in China was my wife. I'm married to a Chinese woman from the mainland, and she's a physician, and we have 2 daughters. So yeah, we get to China fairly often to visit family and such.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. So that is, that would take you back there quite a bit. And it's wonderful. You want to cultivate that, certainly with your 2 girls.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So when and why then did you move back to Michigan? Did you grow up in Michigan?
Well, yes, I did. I was born here in Alpena. Yeah, and but my parents always had work in Lansing, so I went to school in Lansing. But we were up here about 3 months of the year, and of course, it's so beautiful up here. I was always scheming, trying to figure out ways to get back here. But of course, as a musician, I really couldn't make a living up here, at my level of training. But when my wife finished her residency, we decided we'd talk about where we were going to live. And of course, there were no real limitations. We could go anywhere. And my wife is a city girl. She's from a city of 4 million people. But I said, the girls would, I'm sure, enjoy having grandma right there. What about moving back to the old place in Michigan? And she decided she'd give it a try. And it's been really wonderful. And of course, that meant that since she was doing the heavy lifting job-wise, that left me free to just be dad. And the first year, I really didn't do a whole lot other than take care of the baby, which was grand. I really enjoy. I like kids, like all ages. There's always some fun phase they're going through, and
yes, very much.
Kind of the ball being dad.
So, what hospital is your wife affiliated with, or where?
Well, she's part of. She's at a clinic that's part of the Mid-Michigan. It's connected to U of M, and their system purchased our hospital and some clinics a few years ago. And that's before that, at the clinic, she was one of the owners, and that was that kept her pretty busy. But I think she likes the setup now. She doesn't have to do some of those administrative things that we all know are time consuming and such. Yeah, that's what she's doing now.
Well, in addition to being obviously a phenomenal dad, you have not let any grass grow under your feet, as they say, and have jumped into a number of different things. And as I alluded to before, you have been with the GLCO for many years, a long time. And I know you've been in and out of Traverse Symphony Orchestra, and then of course, diving in with Alpina and Gaylord. Tell me a little bit about those organizations and what you enjoy about them. And I know you're conductor and concertmaster of Alpina Symphony. Tell me a little bit about that group.
Sure. Well, I actually don't conduct Alpina anymore. I got to the point where I wanted to be back in my chair playing, and so we found a conductor to come and lead the orchestra so I could play. But I'm also on the board of that organization, trying to, help build it. It had back in the '80s, it was quite active, and then it had sort of just died. And they got it going again in, I think it was 2004. And as a seasonal resident, I would play frequently, but once we moved here, I really dove in and started to take part more fully, and do what I could to, keep it going. Because as we all know, keeping an orchestra alive is, it always feels like they're on life support a little bit. So
it is, excuse me, it is an interesting thing, especially up here, and especially now during, of course, the COVID time. And it just causes you to be very creative and inventive and super positive that, music, whatever type of music is enjoyed by people. It's so very important, especially during this time of COVID and things like that. I know that jumping now to something completely different, not music, I know that you wear multiple hats in the community where you live. You're very civic-minded. You've been the Alpena County Commissioner, and you've been involved with many boards, including the Mental Health Board. So tell us a little bit about what that takes you away from music, that's for sure. And tell us a little bit about how you got into some of these things.
Well, it was interesting. I made a decision when my wife got back into working full time, because she had to go through all of the USMLE tests and everything, and then a residency. And once she got doing that, it wasn't necessary for me to keep doing the things that I was doing to keep the family afloat, and that it left me time to think about other things besides being dad. I mean, that was the main reason. I really enjoy that role. But I decided that anything that came my way, if it was worth spending time away from my family, and it was a job that needed to be done, and a job that probably I was the right guy for, I would say yes, and I would do it gladly. But that if there were things that came my way that I just felt like, well, maybe somebody else could do that, or I really felt that I didn't have the time, I would, try to learn to say no, because saying no sometimes is very hard.
Very hard, yes.
But we had some community meetings in our little town of Lawson, where I live. It's about 10 miles south of Alpena. And this was not long after we got here. There were some community meetings about some issues, and I went to those and spoke up, and apparently a few people were listening. And then about a year later, just out of the blue, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about running for county commissioner?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. That doesn't sound like it's really up my alley." But then another year after that, our commissioner, who had actually just been newly reelected, he passed away, unfortunately, suddenly. And in Alpena, we have 8 commissioners. We have 8 districts. And our district was Sanborn-Ossining Township. And these same folks who had been talking to me before said, "Well, go and apply to be the replacement, to fill out the term." And I went, and there were a few people there vying for the same thing. Some of them had quite a lot of history in the area for a long time, and I thought, well, I can't really compete with that. I mean, some of these people, their families had been here for 100, 200 years,
Right,
whatever, So I said, well, I do have some connection to the area. I can tell you that I know how to do one thing extremely well, I think, and I promise that if you pick me, I will use what I've learned in music, and I will apply that ability to whatever you ask me to do. And that worked really well. In fact, I had so much fun with it. I ran for re-election a couple years later and won, and did it for another term. So I was almost 4 years as a commissioner, but it was an incredible odyssey. I think it should be, really, it should be one of those things like jury duty. Everyone should do it, because when you get involved in your county politics this way, I mean, well, it's really administration. One of the things I did is I ran the Salary and Personnel Committee for 2 years, negotiated 5 union contracts while I was part of that committee, and just so many things I would never have thought I would do. But I really enjoyed this committee, particularly because I found out that I have a real interest in contract law. I find it quite interesting, and so that was really enjoyable.
That, I have to say, was not one of my favorite subjects in law school, but there we are. We all had to take it. But back up a minute, Eric, because you said there was some connection to what your life and your dedication to music and your experience with music and working on your commissioner and your civic minded. So give us an example of something that you felt was a very wonderful carryover that you could use now in this new role.
Well, I think well, it was interesting when I applied for this Fulbright. I'll go back a little further. When I applied for this Fulbright, I went to interview with the committee, and they said to me, "Gee, Mr. Lawson, we were really curious to meet you because we wondered what kind of monomaniac was going to walk in here and what you were going to look like." And I thought, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, you have all this music stuff, and your portfolio, as it were, is not very diversified." And I said to them, "Well, I played the violin. I have to practice hours and hours a day. What do you expect me to do?" So I do feel like a lot of times, and this is a good fit for some people. Some people want to do lots and lots of things and experience those things. I also think we go through phases where we maybe need to focus on one thing to the exclusion of others, and sometimes it's good for us to study lots of things. Everybody has to figure that out for themselves. But for me, I had really just been laser-like focused on music, and I felt like I learned a lot about how you get things done. And a lot of the skills, for example, when I was in school and I decided I wanted to get straight A's, I didn't go to any special classes. I just applied what I had learned with a violin under my chin. And that stood me in very good stead. It was very good approach. So there's a lot that we learn. I think you do any single thing really well, you learn a lot about how to get stuff done.
Right.
And if you apply that to other things.
Right. And there's no question the self-discipline of practice that is required to reach the level to where you are. Certainly with an instrument is incredible dedication and self-discipline, and you set goals for yourself and you reach those goals, and you're constantly doing that. So tell us a little bit. You've got 2 girls. Are either of them involved in music and interested at all? And you have, let me see, what, a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old? Okay.
Yep.
And are either one of them playing any instruments yet?
Oh yes, they both play the violin.
Gee, why is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm really not pressuring them to try to become professional musicians. It's a very difficult world, but I wanted them to teach, or I wanted to teach them what I know about, as we were saying, the self-discipline and growth and whatnot. I wanted to give them that experience. It's very difficult being dad and the teacher. Any parent who has tried to teach their kids stuff, particularly an instrument, will tell you there can be really bumpy spots.
Right.
But I figured it's something I can give them. It's up to them what they do with it. But I really think that it's been helpful.
So are you giving them kind of a classical background, or what is your favorite music? That's a hard question, I know.
Oh yes.
We all have a lot of favorites. If you're teaching them something, what might it be?
Well, right now they're doing a lot of student oriented stuff. But you know, I hope they'll grow to, you know, develop their own tastes in music. And of course, part of this education is just for them to be literate in music and, you know, be able to be good listeners and connoisseurs of music that they like and whatnot. My own personal tastes, you're right, it's a hard question. If I try to think about my favorite music, it's very, very difficult. But I do have some favorites that come to mind. I of course, am a big fan of Bach and Beethoven. You know, violinists and well, of course, the cellists have the suites. We have this great music that Bach wrote that is for, you know, one instrument alone, the sonatas and partitas, and that's sort of like our Bible. It's fantastic stuff. Teaches us so many things we need to know. So I like that, of course. Mozart Concertos. The third Mozart Concerto is one of the reasons I'm a violinist. I used to listen to it on this little portable tape recorder that I had, and I would just walk around with the thing all the time. And of course, Vivaldi, the Four Seasons are fantastic, but there's actually one after the Four Seasons. It's called The Storm at Sea. It's in the same group, but it's like number 5 of that group. It's called the La Tempesta di Mare, the Storm at Sea. It is the most fantastic concerto. I'm telling you, it's just out of this world. I just love it. But I also have some kind of interesting, different sort of tastes. One of them is the music of George Enescu. That's what brought me to Romania. Enescu was quite a prolific composer and very interesting. You know, he was at the same time both cosmopolitan and rooted in his Romanian culture. So he studied in Paris and apparently was in Paris enough that he changed his name so it would be easier for the French to pronounce. His name, the Romanian form of his name, Enescu, has a U at the end, but in Paris he changed it to an O so that it would be easier for them to pronounce. But his music, I'm crazy about it. He wrote, like Mendelssohn, he wrote an octet when he was very young. And this Enescu octet is just the most fabulous piece. I just can't believe we don't play it all the time.
I'm not familiar. I'm going to look it up. Believe me.
Oh, you won't be sorry. And another composer that I'm really crazy about is Astra Piazzolla. And when Piazzolla died, and he was really popular, he became very popular after he died. Isn't that the way of things? But I sort of missed the boat the first time around. But about, I would say in the mid-2000s, I started playing his music and I was just carried away. I heard pieces that I'd never heard before. And Enescu and Piazzolla both touch me in the same way, in that I feel when I hear their music like I've always known it. Like it's always existed and I've always known it. And when I hear music that is really, I know it's going to be a favorite, I have that experience. And I just feel like I always know it. There's a film and TV composer named Bear McCreary. His music does that to me. In fact, the music from the series Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my golly. There's some stuff he wrote in there. Particularly, there's a Passacaglia and something called The Shape of Things to Come. Beautiful string orchestra music, but apparently he hasn't released the arrangements for string orchestra. It's just out in piano music. But I tell you, I want to play that before I die sometime.
Well,
it's just beautiful.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, we were just talking about this yesterday here in the office, how much classical music is actually used in commercials. And I think, and again, especially the time that we are living through right now, which for many people poses, some challenges, whether they're professionally or personally or with families. And for me anyway, music, and I know for you too, Eric, music is just an important part of connecting with your soul and with what's going on and keeping you, connected and at peace and all of that. So music plays an important role in helping us to get through sometimes some difficult times. And so we are just very, very fortunate to have you as part of the orchestra, Eric, and we're very grateful for the leadership that you provide, not only to the violin section, but also to the whole orchestra. And we are just really looking forward to getting back in the concert hall and performing live again. You know, we have just announced the cancellation of our fall season, which means our September and October concerts will not be happening this year out of precaution and safety for not only our musicians, but also for our audience members.
Yeah.
And we are, of course, watching and monitoring all of the different mandates that are coming out. And we are very hopeful that we might be able to be back in the concert hall for December.
Great.
Whether or not that's a Messiah, Eric, I don't know. But there are wonderful, wonderful string ensemble holiday pieces, music that we could certainly perform. So I want to thank you for being with us today, Eric, and I want to thank all of you out there in our audience for joining us. And I want to also encourage anybody who is able to and would like to help the orchestra continue its mission to entertain, to inspire, and to educate, to please give to the orchestra. And we would thank you very much for that. And we thank you for all the support that you show us in so many, many ways. So again, Eric, thank you for being here with us again today. I wish you and your family all the best and can't wait to see you on that stage.
Indeed. Thank you, Judy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.